Alright, in this video we are going to cover another unit test, but here we're going to be focusing on the many different assertions that we can utilize to test the outcome of our test. So we're going to be doing that by testing another component. So I went ahead and I just commented out every single test except for the first one, which tests our header. So I will keep that, and we should see here that one test has passed. I also went ahead and I commented out the second header. You can either comment it out or get rid of it. All right. So the second component that we are going to test works very similarly to the first component that we tested, which is this one over here, the to-do footer. So the way that it works is that we are going to pass a number into this component as a prop, and then it's going to render a specific text. So over here, we're passing in 0 and it's rendering 0 tasks left. Now, if we were to add a task, then we're going to be passing in 1, and notice that it changed to 1 task left. Now, if we were to add another one, then we're going to be passing in 2, and then the text changes. So that is what we are going to be testing. Again, very, very similar to this one. So that is going to live inside of our to-do footer. And you can see here that it's going to take in a prop, number of incomplete tasks. And you can see here that the text lives in a paragraph tag. And you can see that there's just a quick regular expression to see if we should use plural or singular. And so that way, if we have just one task left, it's just one task left instead of one tasks left. And we're also utilizing React Router DOM. And this is a good thing because it's going to introduce how we can utilize React Router and all these other external libraries when writing our tests, because we're going to notice a quick error that we get when writing our tests. So let's actually go ahead and let's create a __ test directory. And in here, we're going to, as usual, create our test. So let's go and let's create the to-do footer.test.js. All right. So now let's just copy this. Let's copy this format. Let's paste that in there. And let's test. Let's just change the text of the test block. So over here, we are basically testing should render the correct amount of incomplete tasks. So should render the correct amount of incomplete tasks. Now, the component that we are going to be utilizing is the to-do footer. So over here, to-do footer. And over here, let's say we're going to render the to-do footer. And then remember, the prop is number of incomplete tasks. So let's go ahead and let's say that the number of incomplete tasks is, 5. And so over here, what we should expect, we should be able to get a paragraph element. Let's just go ahead here and just say paragraph element. And that should say, let's actually just go ahead and let's just add 5 in there. We should see 5 tasks left. So we can say 5 tasks left. And we should expect this paragraph element to be in the document. So this seems like a very valid test, but it is going to fail. Now, why is it going to fail? Well, the reason why it's going to fail, and we can actually scroll up. Let's just scroll up. You can see here that we are utilizing link outside of router. And if we go to our header, we're utilizing this link from React Router DOM to basically change the URL and change the page of our application. Now, we cannot do that without, let's just go over here to index.js, without wrapping the component with browser router. Now, because inside of our test, we're testing this component in complete isolation, it is not going to be wrapped with browser router. So what we could do is create a component that wraps this component with browser router. And what I like to do is call this a mock component. So we can do something like mock to do footer. And here, this is just a function component. And what we can do is we can import browser router from React Router DOM. So let's just import browser router. And over here, we can do browser router. And now we have browser router. And so now what we can do is we can pass in this component. So in here, we can wrap browser router within this component. Let's actually just make this a little bit prettier. So it looks like this. But now we need a way to pass the number that we want to pass in through the mock to do component. So we can do that through props as well. So we can go over here and just say number of incomplete tasks. We're going to pass it in as a prop to the mock footer, which is ultimately going to pass it in as a prop to the to-do footer. So you can see here, that is how that works. So now what we can do instead here is instead of rendering the to-do footer, we could just render the mock to-do footer that contains browser router. So let's go over here and I'm just going to do it in a separate line. I'm just going to do mock to do footer. All right, mock to do footer. And over here, we're going to do number of incomplete tasks. And then we are going to pass in that number. So we're going to pass in 5. So now if we save this and we go back to our tests and we scroll all the way down, they're still failing for some reason. That's strange. I wasn't expecting that actually. Let's actually go here and let's see why that's failing. And it's saying, so nothing was rendered from render. This usually means that the return statement returns null. Okay, I kind of find that strange actually. So over here we have, okay, so nothing was rendered from render. That is strange. So and that's because, well, we forgot to return. So you of course have to return our component. So remember, this has to be a valid component. We actually have to return the JSX. So let's go over here and let's quickly save that. And now our tests pass. Okay, cool. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, let's start looking at some of the different assertions. Because now all we're doing right now is just saying, hey, is this element in the document? And we might want to do many, many other assertions. So another assertion that we might do is if we have only one task left, so if we pass in 1, we expect it to use the singular task. So let's actually copy this and let's go here and let's just change this block. So let's just change this block. We're going to say should render, or we're going to say task singular when the number of incomplete tasks is 1. And so if we pass in 1, we should see the singular version. So 1 task left. So we can also assert this. So we can go ahead, and this is a very valid test. So these are 2 very valid tests. So now let's just go and let's write some other tests that we're just going to use to learn more about assertions. But I think for this particular component, these 2 tests really do the trick. But again, let's just go ahead and let's just write some more tests just to test more about assertions. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to go and paste it. And now let's start working with some other assertions. So over here, what we can do to look at the other assertions, we can just do dot, and we can see some of the many assertions that we can utilize to be called with, to be falsy, to be invalid, to be less than. Most of these assertions, they really speak for themselves and they're very self-documented. To be null, that makes sense. To be truthy, so to be truthy, well, it returns a true value. And actually what we can do is we can actually hover over this and we can read more about the assertion. When you don't care what the value is, you just want to assert that it returns a true value. So it shouldn't be false, it shouldn't be 0, it shouldn't be an empty string, shouldn't be null, shouldn't be undefined, shouldn't be not a number. And well, this is exactly going to be truthy. So we can actually assert this and that is fine. So you can see here that that test passed. Now we can also assert multiple different things, and unfortunately, I won't be able to go through all of the different methods because there are so many. But again, you can always hover over it and just read the documentation for it. So the next one I want to talk about is to be visible. This one's a very interesting one. So again, you can go ahead and hover over it, and you can see here that this one allows you to check that the element is actually visible to the user. So here, what we're doing is we're checking if the element is in the document. But here, we're checking if the element is visible to the user. So the element could still be in the document, but not visible to the user. So for instance, right now, the element, of course, is going to be visible to the user. But what if I went to that element, that footer element, and I added these styles? So let's add these styles of opacity of 0. So to me, that's not going to be visible because the opacity is 0. Now it is still in the document, but the opacity is 0. So we can actually use to be visible to test, hey, is it visible to my user? And you can see here that it fails. So that is a really, really good test. So let me just go ahead and just get rid of that. And now let's talk about some of the other ones that I'm going to introduce. Again, I won't be able to introduce all of them. So let's go over here and let's do dot. And then we can say here to contain. So we are going to get a specific element. And in this element, we can assert that, hey, this element is going to contain the following HTML element, so a p tag. So we can go ahead and save this. And this is a valid assertion. Now, if we say, hey, we expect to get a h3 tag, then that's not a valid assertion because what we get back is a p tag. So let's go here and let's just change the p tag. All right, so let's talk about some of the other ones. I'm just going to go ahead and just explore some of the other ones. Let's see here. So let's do dot, and we can also say to have text content. So we can say to have text content. So instead of saying that, hey, we want to assert that this is in the document, we can say to have text content. Where is it? To have text content. And this text content is going to be one task left. So let's say we weren't able to get the element by the text. So we got it by test ID. Then we can assert that, hey, it has the text content of one task left. Now here we're kind of doing a double assertion, but you can imagine maybe we got this, we got it by the role and paragraph. And then we want to test the text content of that paragraph. And that has failed for some reason because it's not in here. I guess p tags don't have the role of paragraphs, which really doesn't make that much sense to me. Again, you can read more about the documentation for the role, but you guys get the gist. And just to 100% prove this to you, let me just add a test ID. So let's do data test ID. And I'm just going to call this para for paragraph. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. And I'm going to say here get by, and then get by test ID. And I'm going to say para. So go ahead, I'm just going to quickly save this. And we should get everything passing. All right, so let us now talk about the not method that we can use. So we can actually get the opposite of everything by adding dot not and then dot that method. And that gets the opposite of what we want. So we can over here, if we save this, well, here we're saying that, hey, this should not be visible. Now it is visible, so it is going to pass. Again, if I went to this and I changed the styles, so I changed these styles to opacity of 0, then it should not be visible, and then this assertion should pass. Because here what we're saying is, hey, this shouldn't be visible. Now let's just get rid of these styles, and let's get rid of that not. So we can see here that we can utilize that. So let's just copy a test and let's just use that not if we want to. So again, we can put that not to get the opposite of the assertions that we have specified. So we can say here something like dot not dot to be falsy. So here we expect it to not be falsy. So we can go ahead and save this, and this should pass, and it does. All right, so let me just check my notes. It seems like we have one more that I want to talk about. So what we can also do is inside of here, what we can do is this is a element, and we can actually get some of the attributes of that element. So we can get some the value, for instance, of that element. And then over here, what we can do at that point is do just a simple assertion, a dot to be assertion. And then in here, we're going to say, hey, we expect the value of the paragraph element to be, well, one task left. So one task left. So we can get the attributes and actually just assert the attributes themselves. Now, why didn't that work? Let's see. Why didn't that work? I'm a little confused, actually. So we're getting by para, getting by data test ID, which is para, and it's a little confusing, actually. Oh, sorry, we're not getting by value, we're getting by text content. So value is actually something that we only get from an input element, but if we want to get the text content of a specific element, then that's we would use text content instead. And you can see here that passes. All right, so that is the assertions, and we can actually assert multiple times inside of our test. And so over here, we can actually have multiple assertions. Now, I don't recommend this. I like to have one assertion per test because that really isolates where the error is happening inside of the test. Now, let's say that these three pass, but this one fails, then that whole test is going to fail. And then I have to diagnose which assertion is the one that actually failed. So for instance, over here, let's just say I added 5 tasks left. Well, we can actually do all these assertions, but now we have one failed test, and I have to figure out that, oh, actually, I guess it tells you that this is the one that fails. So you can add multiple assertions in there if you want to. So if I were to do 1 task left, then everything is going to pass. But again, this is not a very common approach. You could do it if you want to, but I recommend 1 assertion per test. All right, cool. So that is pretty much it, and I hope that introduces assertions to you in a very well manner, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture.